Today I'm going to try and do some major styling on a juniper that I've been having some trouble figuring out what to do with for a while. I originally bought this as a nursery grown juniper, so it's not very old and it isn't terribly important or expensive. But when I bought it, it was just so fully engulfed in foliage. It just looks so healthy. I thought there's got to be some way I can turn this into a bonsai. And so the way you see it right now is after me cutting back a lot of foliage, maybe, I don't know, 70% of the original foliage back to this. And when I did so, I discovered that it wasn't nearly as good of a shape as I was hoping that it would be. And let me see if I can show you why. So there are a couple of things that aren't really great about this juniper. One is the trunk here, which you can see is fairly narrow from, fairly straight without any kind of taper from base up to here. And that's not terribly unusual for a young juniper. But then what happens is even worse up here. As you can see, originally this may have started to grow up out this way and then maybe was pruned, and then it started growing out this direction as its main trunk. And that created a very odd sort of right angle there in the trunk that is just kind of weird. A little bit of a branch is growing out the top, but that's just too weak and flimsy to turn into another trunk. And so I've been trying to figure out how to salvage this bonsai and try to give it a sort of more normal looking kind of tree shape. And I think I've finally settled on an idea, and we're going to give it a shot here, and I could turn out to be wrong about this, but we'll give it a shot. And of course there are multiple ways that we could go with this. And some of them could be really interesting. For example, I could eliminate this whole branch here, eliminate this little thing at the top, and eliminate this over here, and just leave this branch here. And then what you'd have is a trunk that goes up and then starts to curve down at a dramatic angle and turns into sort of a semi-cascade style, or maybe eventually a full cascade style, where you just keep training this branch to go down, down, down. And that might look kind of interesting, because then you have this sort of visually pleasing angle change there, I think, that might look kind of nice. But I have another idea that I'm going to try out, and we'll see how this goes. Okay, so I'm going to start pruning off some of these branches, and we'll see what we've got as we go. There's this really big branch in the back here that curves around this big branch here. Which again, you could build off of and turn this into an interesting shape somehow. I just feel like the combination of angles here would still be kind of weird, and I'm not sure how to make that visually pleasing, at least in the short term, maybe in the long term. So I'm actually going to cut this off because this is such a thick branch here. I don't know how to make that look good later on. So that just eliminated a major section of tree. So now we're left with something that's a lot thinner and easier to look at. Okay, so now for my next step, I'm going to try and shape this upper branch here, primarily using wiring. So this branch already has a little bit of a wire on it already. I don't know if you can see it, but I'm gonna add some more wire to it. Actually, I think what I'll do is I'll take that off and replace it with a thicker wire, because it's gonna be insufficient, I think, for our needs. I had originally wired this to achieve a different effect, and I was just sort of playing around with how it looked, and I decided I didn't really like the way it was looking, so I'm just going to remove this old wire. I'm not going to throw it away. I know that some people will tell you that they just throw away their old wire that they use. This is aluminum wire, and I don't throw away my old wire because that seems sort of wasteful to me. And aluminum wire is, well, cheaper than copper wire. It's still not terribly cheap, and I would just rather try to reuse this again if at all possible. So what I do is I'll straighten this out again and then reuse it another time. Okay, so this is a 3mm wire, and I'm going to anchor this down at the base of the tree, I think, and then I'm going to wire that branch that we want to focus on. So I'm sort of poking this wire down into the base of the tree just so it doesn't move anywhere. And then I'm just gonna try to loop it around the base of the branch there. I'm gonna loop it around in a way that hopefully won't damage any of the other branches. You have to be very careful as you're doing this. Make sure that you're not trapping other little branches underneath the wire as you go. That takes some skill, and that you're not spacing your loops, your wire loops, too close together or too far apart. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to bend this up. Oh. Did I break it? Yeah, I did. I split the branch there, which isn't too surprising because I'm making a pretty aggressive bend here in the branch. So this happens all the time, and you just have to get used to it. So as I was bending it back, there's a break right here, and one of the branches split. It's okay. It's not the end of the world. That branch is probably going to survive if I want to leave it, and the main branch that I'm really caring about here is going to be just fine too, I think. I'm removing some of the little tiny pieces of foliage that are sticking out in different directions, just to kind of clear this out. So I can see better. So after a lot of working and poking and twisting and turning, this is what I eventually came up with. So you can see we've eliminated a lot of the foliage that was remaining. There's almost none left. And there's still some more work to do. But I've started to create the outlines of the shape that I think I'll eventually want. So this branch, even though I split it here, I think will survive because it's still connected by bark on the back side. And if it doesn't, then we'll revisit the whole design. But what I'm hoping is that that branch can continue to develop and grow downward. This branch will continue to develop and grow downward. And then this will become sort of the apex, and maybe I'll turn this into a branch, and maybe I don't know, curve this over. I'm not quite sure what to do with the very top yet. But this then tries to sort of fix what's wrong with this trunk and tries to make use of this bizarre angle here. And it's not totally perfect. This thickness here is still disproportionate to what comes out here. It looks a little odd, and this branch here isn't really looking particularly useful or interesting. So I'm just going to wait and see how much of this survives over the next few months, and see if any of the limb breakages cause any of these large branches to die off, because then I may rethink the whole thing and just radically change the way I'm going. But if it all survives, then what I think I'll do is I will cut this off and try to sort of shave this part of the trunk off here to start to create a bit more of a taper to that junction there, and soften it up and not make it such a hard angle. And now it's got sort of a zigzag shape that makes use of that angle, and a little bit of a triangle shape that makes it look more like a traditional tree. So tell me what you think about this. I'm not sure I made all the right decisions here, but this is what I've got. Thank you very much.